All right, today we're really diving into something fascinating and super timely. It's all about free speech, political discourse, and, everything that's happening on college campuses right now.
Yeah, it's a hot topic.
Totally. And imagine this. Someone you maybe really admired, someone who, actually shaped your worldview, suddenly seems to contradict everything you thought they stood for.
Ah, okay. I see where this is going.
Exactly. That's pretty much the core of our deep dive today. It's fueled by this thought-provoking YouTube video from the channel Aquarius Waive.
Aquarius Waive, got it.
And this video focuses specifically on Candace Owens, the public figure, and what the creator sees as, inconsistencies in her free speech stance.
Especially regarding the recent campus protests about Israel.
Precisely. So our mission really is to unpack the main arguments, the specific examples from this source,
right,
and help you navigate these complex dynamics, see what it all means for the bigger picture around, expression and accountability.
It's definitely an interesting way to look at these issues, especially, like you said, given she's such a public figure.
Yeah.
And the source using a personal journey, this sort of disillusionment.
Yeah.
It really sets the stage for a critical look at how free speech positions can, seem to shift.
That personal story is where it gets really interesting, right at the start. The YouTube creator, he admits he was a long-term fan.
Okay.
He actually calls her a staple during his, what he calls his great awakening as a young black man.
Wow. Okay, so a significant influence.
Huge. He credits her with helping him move away from the Democratic plantation, his words. He's clear, though he says he can't take that initial impact away from her.
Right, acknowledging that history. But
then, this is where the video points out what it sees as a really striking pivot.
Okay.
It brings up that before she really found her lane in conservatism, Candace Owens apparently worked on an app.
An app? What kind of app?
An app designed to essentially dox people.
Dox, like release private info.
Yeah, expose individuals who were spreading hate speech, according to the source.
Wow. Okay, that's definitely a contrast to championing free speech later on, using information as a weapon, almost.
I mean, it's quite the twist, isn't it? So the video puts that past action right next to her present position.
Which is?
Which the source describes as being in 2025, maybe just meaning currently, where she's shown as really pissed off about free speech being taken away.
Particularly around the campus activism stuff.
Exactly. And the creator, he sees her current actions as performative. Like she's
He uses the word cringeworthy, too, I think.
Yeah, cringeworthy, and even suggests it's a kind of propaganda.
So this perceived inconsistency, that's the main critique running through it.
Pretty much. And the source doesn't just stop with her. It also looks at the Trump administration.
Ah, okay. How so?
It alleges a contradiction there, too, saying they were, clamping down on campus speech
while
also claiming to be huge free speech enthusiasts fighting against DEI.
DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right. Yeah. The creator calls the whole thing so messy and so obvious.
It definitely gets into the complexities and, the perceived hypocrisies around free speech advocacy.
Which brings us right to that crucial point about defining free speech itself, the nuances.
Yeah.
The Aquarius Waive video makes an argument about the Western idea of freedom.
Okay, what's the argument?
That a key part of it is being able to critique Israel in Israel or critique America in America.
Right, the ability to criticize the system from within.
Exactly. It highlights this as fundamental to this Western concept, something maybe we take for granted here.
And what's interesting there, the video then points out that this Western idea isn't universal.
Right.
It says it's not enjoyed all throughout the world, including much of the world, that she now defends vehemently or covertly.
That global context is really important, isn't it? Makes you think about what we consider standard.
Absolutely. It highlights that our baseline isn't everyone's baseline.
And that leads directly to the critical question the source posed. Where does your freedom of speech end?
The $1 million question.
Totally. And the source, it draws a really sharp line.
Which is?
Your freedom of speech ends, it argues, at the point of act.
Meaning when
it becomes like a direct threat on somebody's life.
Okay.
Or inciting a riot or inciting an attack.
So moving from words to direct harm or the immediate potential for it.
Exactly. And the video insists that if that speech manifests in an attack, it should have legal consequences.
That's a pretty standard legal principle, incitement, but it's always debated where that line actually is in practice.
For sure. And that distinction is super critical for understanding the next part, the on-campus situation.
Right, the realities on the ground.
Yeah, Aquarius Waive talks about some really disturbing allegations. Jewish students on campuses being harassed, attacked, even spat on. It specifically mentions Harvard facing a multitude of lawsuits because of these kinds of issues.
So it's painting a picture where the debate isn't just theoretical, it's impacting real people.
Very much so. And the video clarifies who it sees as facing the most heat right now.
Who's that?
It says, the people who are facing the most persecution in real time are those who are seen as Zionists.
Okay, and how does the source define Zionist? Because that term carries a lot of weight.
It does. The source, in this context, defines it very simply, believing Israel has its own right to exist.
Gotcha. So for the purposes of its argument, that's the definition it's working with.
Exactly. Even though, yeah, we know it can be interpreted more broadly elsewhere.
And does the source connect these campus tensions to, like, bigger forces?
It does. It makes some pretty big claims about alleged external influences.
Such as?
It asserts that some pro-Palestine activists, and it characterizes some of them as basically a disguise for pro-Hamas sympathizers.
Okay, strong language there.
Yeah, are allegedly funded by Iran and the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP.
Wow. So bringing in state actors and geopolitical conflicts into the campus protest narrative.
Oh. Right. Adds a whole other layer of complexity, according to the source.
And does it give examples of where speech allegedly crosses that line into incitement on campus?
It does give a couple of specific examples. It names Nardine Kiswani.
Who's that?
Leader of a group called Within Our Lifetime. The video states her motto is, Palestinians will only get justice when Israel ceases to.
Okay.
And the source claims she incited students to escalate during protests.
Escalation being the key word there, moving towards action.
Seems to be the implication. It also mentions someone called Bob, a villain, talking about death to the IDF.
IDF, Israeli Defense Forces.
Right. The creator argues these are clear examples of speech becoming incitement.
And if they lead to attacks, should have consequences, back to that earlier point.
Exactly. Which then raises the question about the universities themselves, right?
Yeah, what's their role, or lack thereof, according to the video?
Well, the video is pretty critical. It argues that campus leaders, faculty, staff, they're seen as doing nothing about these abuse crimes.
This alleged inaction, that fuels the criticism.
Yeah, especially when, as the source sees it, you have public figures maybe defending the atmosphere that allows.
Okay. And does the source try to explain why this might be happening, the underlying reason?
It gets into some really controversial territory there. It talks about ideologies and scapegoating.
Okay.
It describes one view. It attributes to some activists that Jews as white people, and white people are bad, and white people need to be destroyed because we're mad about slavery and colonial powers.
Whoa, okay. That's a complex and a pretty inflammatory connection being made there.
Definitely. And the video also puts forward this scapegoat theory.
Which is?
That the far left wants an excuse and the far right wants an through the...
So suggesting Jewish people are being used as a sort of proxy target by both extremes for different reasons.
That seems to be the source's assertion, yeah. It's a very strong claim about the motivation.
And are specific universities mentioned as examples?
Yeah, it singles out Columbia University.
The Ivy League school.
Right. Describing it as an institution saturated to the brim with these activists, calling them Marxist activists, pushing these narratives.
Okay, so painting a picture of specific hotspots for this kind of activity.
Yeah. So, I mean, after all that, what does this really mean for you listening?
Right.
Our deep dive into this one source, the Aquarius Waive video, it definitely reveals a really charged debate.
For sure.
All around free speech, especially when you have these deeply held political beliefs, identity issues clashing head on, particularly on college.
It really highlights that tension, doesn't it, between the ideal of open discussion and the practical question of, where does speech cross the line?
Yeah, into incitement or harassment.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows very different expectations for how public figures, how institutions should handle these really complex situations.
Absolutely. And this whole discussion, pulling apart this one perspective, it really leads to a bigger question for you to think about. As these conversations around free speech, around identity keep evolving, and they are constantly in this very polarized climate, how can we, as individuals, as a society, get better at telling the difference between genuine calls for justice and what some people might see as just divisive propaganda or even incitement?
Especially when, as this source really illustrates, the lines can seem so blurred by history, by grievances, by these intense geopolitical tensions.
Exactly. It's not easy, but it's something worth considering.